Hey guys, sorry it's been so long since the last class guide video. That's really hard to say. The reason being I wanted to get everything to level 30 myself to make sure I just wasn't talking out of my behind quarters about what the best builds are. And I spent a considerable amount of time playing on the hardest difficulties as well as researching the classes thoroughly through the class discussions on both Reddit and Discord. And in this video, we are taking a look at the Ogryn Skullbreaker. That's right, the big boy. And as we always do, we're going to be breaking down the talent choices while also talking a little bit about the others and situations in which they may be better to take. And then we're also going to do a breakdown on the best weapon choices. And let's jump into it by quickly covering all of the things that the Ogryn comes with as standard. So Blitz is our grenade. We just throw a metal box at something that deals an absolute ton of damage. Our aura is intimidating presence, plus 10% heavy melee attack damage to ourselves and all allies in coherency. Thick Skin is a passive that increases our toughness damage reduction and health damage reduction by 20%. Our iconic is 25% melee stagger, so you're going to be knocking things all over the place. And another passive is Loyal Protector. Being damaged while reviving or assisting allies no longer interrupts you from being able to complete those actions. And finally, our ultimate ability, Bull Rush. Charge forward, knocking enemies and gaining 25% attack and movement speed for 5 seconds. Very fun ability to do. Send everyone flying like a bowling ball. Okay, and kicking things off is the level 5 talents. We have Linchpin. It says 100% toughness replenishment and in brackets allies in coherency. Now, to explain how this one works, I just got to quickly explain toughness. Toughness regenerates outside of combat based on how many allies are in coherency. So at 1 it's at its slowest and at 4 it's at its fastest. This doubles that rate for just you and nobody else. It does sound like it means for the allies, but it's actually the other way around. A little bit confusing how that one's worded. Smash 'em Good is replenish 20% of your total toughness on single enemy heavy melee hit. This is really good, but the next one is even better because it's basically the same thing except for a cleave attack. And you'll understand a little bit more why this is so good as the build goes on. But these two are more or less the same. It just depends on the weapon that you're taking. But for our build, we want the one that gives us 20% toughness on hitting multiple enemies because we're going to be doing that a lot. Moving on to the level 10 talents, the first one is Heavyweight. 50% damage to and damage reduction from basically every other Ogryn. Now this can actually be a pretty good talent if you end up in situations where you're just duking it out with other big boys, but as an Ogryn, this won't usually end up being your job, so you're not really going to be making a huge amount of use out of this in a good team. Next is Bombs Away. Now I spoke about Blitz, our grenade being able to explode with a talent. Here it is. If you hit an armored target, an unyielding target, or a boss, this thing will like burst open and just blow the hell out of everything. It's hilariously high damage. It's a very fun ability for sure, but it's not the best in this line because the next one is Blood and Thunder, and this applies 1 stack of bleed on heavy melee hit. Now by itself, this doesn't sound too amazing, but believe me, wait until we get a little further into the build and you'll understand why this is so darn strong. Our level 15 abilities start with Towering Presence. This is a 50% increase to the radius of your coherency. Now, with some use cases, like if you had Linchpin, this would kind of be bigger value, but for now, this is not really that great because at the higher levels, you're going to have to play close to each other anyways, so you're not always going to get a fantastic amount of use out of that talent. Lead the Charge next. When you activate Bull Rush, allies in coherency gain 25% movement speed for 4 seconds. And the wording there is important. It's when you activate it, the allies that are near you get the speed boost. Now, for speed running, this is fantastic because you'll be often running ahead of people just to go kill things and get through the level much faster. But in the higher level games, you'll be bull rushing to your allies, not away from them. So that 4-second speed boost is not really ever going to be on anyone, and if it is, it'll be on maybe one person. You won't be getting a ton of value out of it unless you're speedrunning. And finally, Bullfighter. This is the one that we're actually picking. This is a 10% cooldown reduction anytime an ally in coherency kills an elite enemy. Does exactly what it says on the tin, just means you can bull rush more often and it's up when you really need it. Next is level 20, and the talents we have here are Die Hard, 100% toughness replenishment while below 25% health. This is not the best because, again, it has the condition of you having to be, first of all, almost dead, and secondly, out of combat. So we're not going to go with this one. Next is Hard as Nails. This is a minus 25% damage taken for each ally that's currently knocked or incapacitated. So that counts like people caught in nets or taken down by dogs. It's good damage reduction, but the condition in which it's activated is your friendlies being down, which is not good, because that's hopefully not most of the time. So the uptime on this is going to be relatively low. And then we have the talent we've actually gone for, Bloodthirst. 10% damage resistance per bleeding enemy in melee range, stacks 5 times for a total of 50% damage resistance. Moving on to 25, it starts with Payback Time. When an enemy damages you, gain 20% damage against enemies of the same type for 5 seconds. Actually a great talent. We would have gone for this otherwise, but again, it has a condition of you being hit, which is not ideal because you're going to be trying to avoid being hit most of the time. Knife Through Butter. Now this is a funny one. I love how this sounds. Fully charged heavy attacks have unlimited cleave. So in theory, you'll just pass through every enemy like they're not there, getting an absolute ton of AoE damage out. Sounds great and would be perfect for this build, but honestly, when I use it, I cannot feel a difference. Like, no matter what weapon I'm using, pretty much all of them just travel through everything like it's not there already. So unless like I've missed a particular weapon that utilizes this really well, I honestly just don't understand how this talent has like any value, you know, especially when versus the other two. If anyone does have a unique use case for this where they found that it just like makes something super OP, please share it with us. I'd be really interested in testing that out. And finally, the talent that we did go with, and this one is worded real funny, 5% damage next melee hit on melee hit for each enemy hit with an initial attack. I take this to mean that we get 5% damage for each target that we cleave on our next attack. This is fantastic because we're going to be cleaving an absolute bunch. And finally, moving on to the level 30 abilities. The first one is Bull Gore, +2 bleed stacks on enemies hit by Bull Rush. Now, we don't really need any more bleed stacks. This build will be producing an absolute ton of them for us already. So for that reason, we're going to take one of the other two options because it's just better value for us. And then next we have Non-Stop Violence. This is actually a very powerful talent, so I would not blame you for picking this one instead. Replenish 10% toughness per Bull Rush hit. This just means that if you're rushing towards your friendlies during a particularly difficult fight, you're going to come through with your toughness pretty much filled up because there will definitely be more than 10 enemies. And the final talent we've gone for is Unstoppable. And this is actually nothing to do with the double distance you cover with your ult as part of this talent. It's the not being blocked by enemies except monstrosities. This means that Crushers, Reapers, and Bulwarks will no longer interrupt your ultimate, and in the higher difficulties there are tons of these guys. This makes your ult far more reliable and will always make sure that you're able to get to where you're needed. And quickly, before we jump into the weapons, let's summarize the build. So for every heavy attack we do, first of all with our aura we'll be doing an additional 10% damage, gaining 20% of our total toughness back, applying 1 stack of bleed to every enemy that we hit, and gaining 5% damage for every enemy that we've hit. And then those bleed stacks will proc Bloodthirst, which will then give us up to 50% damage reduction as long as we have 5 enemies bleeding. And then finally, for our ultimate, we have Unstoppable, which allows us to travel really long distances and even knock over some of the biggest enemies in the game. And we recover the cooldown very quickly due to Bullfighter. 10% of that cooldown gone every time we kill an elite, and in the higher difficulties this means we'll have a very short cooldown. And now that's all covered, let's jump into the equipment. And to start us off, because it's nice and quick, we'll just cover curios. These are nice and simple. You basically just want to stack toughness and health as flat percent increases, and then after that you want to try and get damage reduction from any common source that you're having issues with, for example gunners. And then for melee weapon, well actually really quick, I just want to say that Ogryns are very versatile in which weapons that they can take, more so than I think any other class that I've been playing. However, I would strongly recommend this cleaver here, specifically the Krork Mark 6 cleaver. The reason being is that this particular weapon has 2 horizontal swipes as its heavy attacks, which this build is just all about. So this is a fantastic moveset for that. The weapon itself is specifically very good at handling large amounts of enemies, especially the unarmored ones. Does alright against flak armor, but it does come into issues against carapace armor like the crushers, but you can still effectively knock them back quite a bit with this weapon, so you are providing some value to your team here, but you won't be the one killing it. As far as defense goes, it's obviously not amazing for that. It is a dagger. And when it comes to stats that you want to try and aim for, obviously the more damage you can get on your heavy attack, the better. Cleave damage, again, you want that to be nice and high. Mine isn't a good example. This is quite a fresh level 30. In terms of perks, you kind of want to get armored damage, or perhaps like anything to do with damaging unarmored targets. And for blessings, some great examples of ones to go for would be Confident Strike. This replenishes toughness on chained hits, which you will be doing quite a lot. And another that I've never actually managed to get myself is called Unstoppable Force, and this allows you to cleave through armor as if it wasn't there. But in general, it's just safe to say that if it increases your ability to cleave, gives you toughness, or gives you flat damage, then it's good. And then a close second would be the Maul and the Slab Shield. This is obviously for those who want to fulfill a more tank-like role. This weapon has a ton of very good uses for it. Like, for example, you can basically solo tank a demon host and never die thanks to the special, which allows you to just hunker down and become this absolutely unmovable, unkillable, like, just block of iron. However, you cannot move while you're using it. This weapon is basically exactly the same in what you want from it. You want to try and find as much cleave and crowd control on this one as you can. And as for perks, you want to aim for that damage against enemies, specifically armored ones is always the best. They're the hardest to kill. Confident Strike is a fantastic one to get on this one. And again, anything else that can increase your cleave and or gives you toughness back is a very safe bet to go for. Moving on to ranged weapons. Now, with the Ogryn, you'll find yourself not using this as much as you would probably like to, because some of them are pretty fun. And to be honest, there's only real like one good versatile option here, and it is the Grenadier Gauntlet. It does fantastic single target damage to the target that you actually hit with the grenade. It's surprisingly accurate and easy to hit things with at long distances, which can't be said for the others. It's got a great special that does a pretty decent amount of damage, but more importantly knocks things down very easily. And other than that, you know, it's just a simple to use weapon. You know, it's a grenade launcher, point and click. When it comes to perks and blessings, this is really easy. Everything that does damage to specials and elites. So anything like that, that's what you want. You don't want to worry too much about getting toughness back on this item specifically, even though I know I haven't really got a good one here, but again, you know, I'm looking for that anything like this that does extra damage to armored or elite enemies. That's what I'm gonna go for. That's the juice right there, boys. And I want to finish this section off by saying it really doesn't like matter too much what you pick. This is just best in slot. I have seen Ogryns use absolutely everything to great effect. And the cool thing is most of these weapons will work very, very well with the bleed build. I will say, however, you need to make sure that you're using this Mark 6 cleaver, because the Mark 4 here, though it is a very cool looking weapon, it has a slightly different move set. You have to do a strike down before getting a cleave on the heavies, and that goes for the latrine shovel as well as the bully club as well. Something to bear in mind, it makes those slightly less efficient at spamming heavy attacks because you have to chain in lights every time as well. But other than that, you know, everything here can work. Same goes for the guns. I'm not telling you this is what you have to play in order to complete the game. This is just the most optimal build. However, you know, the devs have done a pretty good job of making sure that everything is usable. And that's about it. So, you know, in a nutshell, we want to be in the thick of it, building up those bleed stacks, spamming heavy attacks, knocking things all over the place, chopping the smaller enemies just straight up in half, and bringing out that ranged weapon for those niche situations when we need to use it. This is an incredibly fun build to play. It's insanely tanky and does a surprising amount of damage as well. I guarantee you're going to enjoy it. If there's any interesting builds that you guys know that you'd like to share with the viewers, by all means, please share it down below. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, don't forget to subscribe and like. Peace.